Thanks for taking the time. Obviously, the season coming to an abrupt end. I didn't think we'd be talking under these circumstances, so I must ask, have you ever even considered taking out the golf clubs at this time, whether it's the weather, having a decent winter, and then, of course, the hockey season being cut short? Is this the earliest you've thought about taking out the old sticks?
Yeah, pretty much, in quite some time. I mean, I've had a few seasons that haven't gone too well over the years, but this one, to be middle of March thinking about it is not a good thing.
No, and how about the mood the other day? I mean, it didn't, I think an elimination would feel a little bit differently for the team, but it almost felt like that with that somber mood because of winning 8 of 11 games. You really thought after the moves Watson and the Walleye brass made to improve this roster, to overtake Cincy for first place, get to another Kelly Cup final, that almost makes this sting a little bit more with how good this team was playing, no?
Well, I certainly can agree with you. And, being that, I've never had that finish at the top end to a season where you're, hoisting a cup and those things. In my career, I've seen my fair share of seasons end. And, and you look at it and you just see the way guys reacting. And I think there was that somber, you've lost, the season has ended. But then there's also that, where it was still not, is it really happened? Has it really happened this way? Are we really done? And I think the way it was so sudden on this that, you go from, oh man, we're going to have to play a game with nobody in the building,
right,
to, 2 days, 3 days later, you're getting the call that the season's over. And now it's, hey, you got to come down, get your stuff. And that's all she wrote. I think there was a lot of that to the way this season came to a close that I think a lot of guys just hadn't even set into them yet that, oh my God, this is done. And I think, when you're looking at mid-March, you're just never done at this time of the year, no matter what your season's going at.
Walleye play-by-play man, Matt Melzak here, of course. And speaking of that game last Wednesday, you, myself, 5 others in that building, was that one of the more, if not the most bizarre broadcasting experience you've ever had with the horn going off with nobody there? Barely any music and warm-ups? How about that for a second?
It was a little bit. It was a little bit different, no question about that. But the funny thing is, we had just played a game very similar 2 weeks earlier. We were in Brampton for the morning game, and at the 11 a.m. game, and they got a teacher strike going in Ontario. So all of a sudden, we had maybe 30, 40 people in the building and played the game. And it was quiet and a lot of things, you heard their horn go off when they scored and there was nobody really even cheering. It was kind of surreal then, you're thinking, oh, well, this is kind of different. And then sure enough, here we are 2 weeks later doing the same thing. Yeah. And with no one, literally no one in the building. I mean, 10 people at most with staff and, maybe 20 at most with staff. I mean, it was crazy. And then to all of a sudden to be sitting here talking to you on, a Tuesday night instead of coming off a 4 and 5 weekend as the season's done. I mean, that's amazing how fast this turned.
Yep, that's the world we live in right now, obviously. And obviously, there's no question about whether or not it was the right decision. They had to do what they had to do. The players said as much. Waddy said as much. I'll get to the individuals in a second because we have some things to do in that department with the bright spots. But overall, after watching the Cincinnati Cyclones be a first-place club for basically the better part of 2 seasons, did you feel like all things considered, maybe off the individual performances, maybe off the recent acquisitions from Dan Watson and the Walleye Brass, did you feel like this team was built to beat Cincy and eventually maybe win the division and have the road to the Kelly Cup go through Toledo? Did you feel a little something about this team as far as them specifically being able to, I mean, I'm watching them against Cincy on several occasions, Matt. They're not getting knocked off the puck. I thought they were bigger. I thought they were stronger. Billy Christopoulos made mention it the other day. 4, 5, 6 goals a game certainly helps. I had a gut feeling that this team was built to beat Cincy, not only for the division, but in a playoff series. How about that for a second as far as that rivalry goes?
Well, I think all you got to do is just look at how Toledo fared in the division all season. I mean, the only team that was a struggle at all was in Indianapolis. When you look at it, Toledo went, 2-4-3 against them during the regular season. That was it. The rest of the division, though, 7-3 against Cincinnati, 9-1
destroyed
against Fort Wayne. Yep, I mean, dominated Fort Wayne, 5-0-1 against Kalamazoo, 6-2 against Wheeling, 7-2 against Wheeling. I mean, they did very well in the division, and those first two rounds of your playoffs are in the division. So, yeah, I felt very confident and very good about this team at least going to the conference finals. You don't know. We never saw Allen during the course of the year. We never saw Utah during the course of the year. They're supposed to be, both of them were pretty good. We saw Idaho, and there were some great games against Idaho when they were in town. 2 great games there, lost one, won one. And they were the team that was sitting in third in that Mountain Division. So you don't know how it would have went from there, but I certainly would have liked Toledo's chances to at least be in the conference finals. And once you're there, you're one of the last 4 teams. That anything can happen at that point.
Absolutely, and that's what's wonderful about the game of hockey. You can't say that about all sports, but you're absolutely right. We're happy to be joined here by Walleye Play-by-play man Matt Melzak. He's kind enough to join us on our Straight Dope interview, which is, of course, brought to you by the Casual Pint, Toledo's most unique craft beer market. Crowlers and growlers being filled with the Irish beers, one of 35 craft beers on tap. That is at the Casual Pint Toledo, where beer lovers meet, still open for takeout tonight until 8 p.m. Walleye end up 37-17-4 on the abbreviated season. And, well, look, the reason why they got there was because who would have thought with the revolving door at the goaltender position there would be the depth that they had? I mean, Larson, their goalies were banged up at times, mind you, with him and Fulcher and all, but the talent level at goalie was through the roof. And then in comes Billy Christopoulos, one of the better stories. Forget about walleye hockey, all of ECHL hockey. Billy Christopoulos, 93%, superb save percentage. When you win 20-something games, that has a lot to do with the blue line and a lot to do with the scoring, but Billy did his job as well. You want to talk about one of the better stories, it's Billy Christopoulos at the top of the list for me. How about that for a second?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think there's a couple of big-time storylines with this team, and clearly Billy Christopoulos has to be the front and center one. You don't know what you're getting. We're getting on a bus to go to Reading, Pennsylvania, the Wednesday, the night before Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
And we're loading up the bus, and all of a sudden, here comes Pat Nagel because he's been called up to Grand Rapids. So now you're looking at, okay, we've got Andrew D'Agostini is our only goaltender going on the trip. We just picked up Andrew D'Agostini on that Sunday or Monday. And here's the only guy. So, Dan's working the phones, and credit to him and his staff because they worked very hard on Thanksgiving to try to find a goalie, and they were able to work out a deal to get Billy Christopoulos and flew him in to be in Reading, and, he watched the first night. Second night, he makes over 40 saves, and you're watching this kid, and you're going, man, Toledo wins the game 7-4. He's terrific, 44 shots, 40 saves. You're like, wow, this guy's really good. Then you see him start to build momentum, getting into the net a whole bunch in the month of December, and this guy is really, really good. And then, it just is kind of built from there, and you look at him and the way he has gone all year, and sometimes you think about a guy like him that, 4 years in college, Air Force Academy, those guys get kind of buried sometimes. Yeah. And, you don't, see he signed, so he just gets an ECHL deal with South Carolina to start the year, and he's played 1 game in the first month and a half of the season. You kind of get buried sometimes. And you get buried in college, you get buried in the pro ranks, and then all of a sudden you start to get that opportunity and you blossom. Thomas Scholl for Idaho is another one who could win goalie of the year, certainly for the league. Billy Christopoulos will be in that mix as well, but there's another guy that was buried at Bowling Green, pushed right out, the number 3 goalie at Bowling Green, and all of a sudden he gets a chance in pro ranks, and he's been outstanding for Idaho. So, these things, sometimes it's all about opportunity, Nick, and for Billy, he got his opportunity with Toledo, and he ran with it.
Yeah, and of course the Stingrays, they had goalie depth themselves, had a big-time year, so they thought Billy was expendable from that perspective, and Billy needed a chance, and he got that, and he praised the coaching staff for that chance, and I guess that's why they referred to it oftentimes as the ever-changing hockey league. And another player that had a change of scenery, of course, was Kessner, who was just on the show 2 weeks ago, and I'll tell you what, you saw him in Newfoundland in that Kelly Cup final. He was a big X factor in that series, but boy, you can't say you expected what we got out of Kessner this year, no?
No, I think you could have actually going in.
Did.
You look at his numbers the year before. A lot of times you see a guy that is coming out of college, and and he had good numbers at Alabama Huntsville, but that's not exactly a barn burner of a program.
It's not, no.
And they're never really at the top there. And you're like, well, what are we getting with this guy? And Newfoundland, obviously, they put him in some spots to succeed. And then he comes to Toledo, and you see him get even more and more and more opportunity. And again, we say the same thing. Sometimes you see players flourish when they get opportunity. You also see them fail when they get opportunity. And that's when you find out everything you need to know about a player. And a player like Josh Kessner, who started the year and all of a sudden he's like, wait a minute, you're putting me on the penalty kill? He never played penalty kill at all in Newfoundland. They said, you're an offensive guy. We're playing you on the offensive side of the puck. And he really relished taking on more responsibility. And with more responsibility came more opportunity for him to succeed. And he certainly did that with a fantastic year, leads the league in scoring when it's all said and done, over 70 points. I mean, just an outstanding year for Josh Kessner. He's a terrific individual. He's the kind of guy you root for. He's fun to talk with. He's a great dude. And I think it was just fun to watch him succeed this year.
Yeah, and while I didn't know him on a personal note at the time, I remember specifically calling the Bowling Green, Alabama Huntsville game at the front end of Kessner's collegiate career, and he stuck out. I mean, on that Alabama Huntsville team, as you said, not necessarily littered with superstars, but Kessner stuck out, and it's no surprise that he's been a rapid success, and obviously he was on pace to break the single-season walleye scoring record, which you can't guarantee anything, but let's be honest, the odds were in his favor in doing that. But it had a lot to do, and good for Kessner for saying this because he's right. It had a lot to do with that line. I mean, how about the line? If you can tell me that Berschbach, Winnie, and Kessner will be in the building for camp, there's no scenario you can draw up where these guys don't play on the same line together, right? I mean, you're not the head coach, but from a broadcasting perspective, they have to play together again. I mean, that was that fun to watch this year, was it not?
Yeah, it certainly was. And if they're all back in the fall, I think that starts right up. But it does say an awful lot. Kessler, obviously you got to be able to finish those plays. Mm. But boy, you look at those other two, and you look at Josh Windquist, and I thought going into the year, and he was the guy who missed pretty much all of the previous year. He was with Utah for 5 games, season-ending knee surgery, done for the year, had to come back from that, signs with Toledo, and just looking at his overall numbers, I thought he had a chance to be Toledo's best player during the year, right? From that center position, premium position, terrific numbers, produced in the American Hockey League, well over a point per game when he's played in the ECHL. Certainly thought he would have a big year, and he did. He had a lot of personal issues he had to deal with this year, including the loss of his dad. Those things can really weigh you down, but he rose above them, had a terrific season. And then, of course, you look at Shane Berschbach, and I think, Nick, honestly, I don't know how good your game is. I know where my game is, and I could probably score a few goals if I was on the same line with Shane Berschbach because he finds you. He does. He finds the open player. His vision on the ice is just so spectacular. The game is so slow to him that he is able to make plays that you can't believe that he has made. And there's so many times over the course of the season where I see a play, we get a goal, and then all of a sudden you go, man, that is outstanding, and the play was made by Shane Berschbach. It's just terrific to watch.
Yeah, and that's why he's one of the all-time greats as far as the Toledo hockey franchise is concerned. And despite it being a sour taste of not being able to make that 8th playoff appearance in 11 years, plenty of bright spots to go around and plenty to look forward to next year. And while nobody knows, this is obviously completely ever-changing when you're talking about an ECHL program, but as far as I know, nobody retiring. Any footnotes to close the season as far as next year is concerned? Obviously, you can't predict too much, but all in all, Coach said nobody's retiring, and he thought it was a pretty good mood with the exit meetings after the season came to a screeching halt. How about that to close it out?
Yeah, I think so, too, and I think I'll be looking forward to seeing who does come back, and because other teams are going to be talking to players once we get into the summertime, and
right.
Who knows if everyone will come back or how teams will look when you get going into the summertime. But if you do end up seeing a very similar squad, I think it could be another good year, and it probably will be. I mean, Dan Watson has done such a great job. You have to certainly tip your cap to him and all the things that he's dealt with. This year was a lot with the goalies and found one to make it work. And every year, last year was with defense. Where it was constantly a struggle trying to find that defensive group, but managed to put together a team that could go to the finals. So I think you have to look at him first and go, you know what, he knows the buttons to push to get a team in here that's going to be good and competitive and is going to compete for a Kelly Cup. And I look forward to seeing what the product is when we get to October.
And I agree with that. He just a superb job managing this roster. And we know one thing for sure we can bank on, and that's there's going to be 7,500, 8,000, 85 in there night in and night out to start next season, perhaps with a little bit of an extra itch to get that 8th playoff appearance. So we look forward to it, Matt. You did a hell of a job in year 15. Always a pleasure to listen and watch you. And we'll keep in touch as we move along in the offseason, okay?
Sounds good, Nick. Thank you so much.
All right, enjoy the golf game and everything else considered. Matt Melzak, of course, kind enough to join us on our Straight Dope interview, which is always brought to you by the Casual Pint, Toledo's most unique craft beer market. Doors are still open. In fact, during this tough time, our good friends at the Casual Pint want to make sure you're covered. So they installed the Pint at Home, as that has you covered with the amazing Casual Pint grub ready to pick up in 20 minutes. You can order from your computer, tablet, or phone, available tonight until 8 p.m. Also available is the high-end beer and wine. 35 craft beers on tap can be poured to the aluminum 32-ounce growlers and crowlers. And, of course, you have the cans to take home with you as well. They are rocking the local Irish brews for St. Paddy's Day, from Ernest to Bandits and so forth. Wash it down with the bottles or cans, as I said, and then also available for carry-out. Coolers completely stocked at the Casual Pint. All new to-go hours going forward until further notice, 3 to 8 p.m. every day. For a current tap list, please visit the Untapped page and be sure to follow along for continuous updates on Facebook and Instagram. That is at the Casual Pint Toledo, where beer lovers meet.